So today, what we're talking about, I've got Julian Hill here. He's an expert in small business insurance, and this is one of these topics that we don't think about. We put it off until we actually need it, but this can really impact our business, right? And so, the first part of this conversation, Julian's going to present for us. We may interrupt him if we've got some questions or want a little bit more clarity. But please share your questions in the chat. We really want to focus on not just the presentation, but getting your specific questions answered. What I love about Simply Business is their responsiveness, right? So they lead with customer service. Everybody I've talked to on their team is very quick, very thorough to reply. And so we really want to be able to bring that type of interaction to the webinar, right? So if you have questions that you've been scared to ask or just didn't make the time to ask, really want you to be able to throw those in the chat, and we'll get Jillian. If Jillian doesn't know the answer, we'll follow back up with you, but we can certainly have a great discussion around it. All right, I think that's all the housekeeping. So let's get in it. I'm gonna kill my video so we can focus on you. And yeah, great to have you, Julian.
Awesome, I appreciate it, Jason, and thank you for the introduction. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. I have a little presentation kind of ready. Can everyone see that all right? Perfect. I'll take that as a yes, hopefully. Perfect. Okay, thank you. So like Jason said, my name is Julian Hill, and I'm representing Simply Business. And today we'll just be talking to you about how to get the right coverage without overpaying for insurance. Today I'm going to give you just some tips on how to save money. I'll even throw in a couple, real life examples to make it resonate. But first, I'll talk a little bit about myself, why I'm speaking to you all today, and then we'll get into it. And kind of like Jason said, please ask questions throughout. I want this to be interactive and not just listen to myself ramble for an hour, because I could very easily do it. Totally fine if you want to wait till the end, but yeah, please feel free to put it in the chat. Jason, interrupt me, because I might not be looking at it all the time. Perfect. So I'll go on to this next one here. So I am the Senior Insurance Product Manager at Simply Business, overlooking kind of the core growth of the U.S. business. And I emphasize U.S. because we have another office located in the U.K., but I've been with the U.S. business a little over 3 years. My focus as the Senior Product Manager is truly just listening to what customers are asking for, small business owners being our customers, and working with our various insurance carrier partners to build insurance products tailored to meet our customers' needs. I also kind of overlook product performance of the entire U.S. book of business, and I'm also responsible for the P&L. But before this, I spent another 6 years at a digital insurance brokerage out of Chicago, again, focused on small business insurance. There, I started up the personal lines team, ran their wholesale division, and also started their MGA. But before I even got into product management, I was on the phones talking to small business owners like yourself each and every day. So I can say that I've literally spent my entire career helping small business owners find insurance. So a little bit about Simply Business. Founded in 2005, we now have offices in Boston and London. I work out of the Boston office, even though I am actually located in Nashville. We're a very remote-friendly culture. But we are...
Julian, is that a long drive for you? A long commute from Nashville to Boston?
So we actually did a U-Haul about 20 hours in total from Boston to Nashville when we originally moved down here. Split it up over 2 days, but we took the U-Haul pretty much to the limit to try to get there. And I think the flight's probably, 2-3 hours maybe? It's not too bad, actually. Cool. So Simply Business, online business insurance platform. We specialize in helping small business owners find insurance. And honestly, it's not even small business owners. It's truly the micro side of small commercial insurance. When we think of small commercial insurance, we think of anywhere from 0 to 50 employees, or at least that's typically what insurance carriers think of. We focus on the micro side. So about 93% of our customers are 0 to 3 employees, and over half are brand new in business buying insurance for the first time. We're one of the only insurance brokerages where you can actually receive multiple quotes from different insurers and actually, pay via credit card, get an insurance policy and a certificate of insurance all online immediately. You just go to simplybusiness.com, click on get quotes, and then fill out your business information from there. Obviously, it's all free. And you might have just seen in the news, we just partnered with Amazon to provide all of their vendors with access to business insurance as their preferred provider. Cool, so let's get into it. So what do we expect from this webinar? So a couple things. So first off, why you may be asked to get business insurance, why business insurance can be so damn expensive, and then a couple insider tips and strategies to avoid overpaying for insurance. And spoiler alert, it can be expensive. Quick legal disclosure basically says, I don't know anything. I'm in my 30s and still cut myself shaving this morning, so don't take anything I say seriously. I can barely hold my own life together. No, I'm kidding. So general informational purposes only, not intended to provide legal, tax, yada, 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 or any other professional advice. Cool. So why get business insurance? A couple different factors. So reason number one, it can be required based on your business's location. So different states have different insurance requirements, especially depending on the type of work you do. For example, many states require general contractors to carry general liability insurance. Your town or your city may also have some specific insurance requirements that you need to meet, but usually you can find out what those are by visiting your state or city's government website. Reason number two, so it can help protect you from common risks in your industry, right? Accidents and mistakes happen to the best of us. And depending on what you do, you may be more likely to experience certain risks than, say, other industries. For example, if you work in financial services, maybe as an accountant, and you miss that extra zero in the year-end closing statement, your mistake could affect your client's finances. And then depending on how severe your business exposures are, your state or even your clients may ask you to get a business insurance policy. And then reason number three, it can help you get more business, right? Your customers and clients are doing a lot of research to figure out who they should hire for a project. They're reading online reviews, they might be visiting your website, they might be looking for other, trust cues that they should hire you. And one of the biggest trust cues you can provide them is a certificate of insurance stating that you have active business insurance, or maybe posting that up on your website. Having insurance shows that you take you and your business seriously. It can also mean that if any accidents or mistakes happen and your clients lose money, they'll be able to recoup those losses from you without coming after your personal finances. So why is business insurance so expensive? Your business's risk can influence your policy price. See that guy that's literally, cooking on open flame with what looks to be a handle of cheap vodka in the other hand, which let's just hope he's using for cooking. His business insurance will likely be more expensive than, say, a coffee shop that just uses a microwave and toaster oven. We talked about how risk, can be a reason to get a policy, but it can also play a role in what you end up paying. It stands to reason that, if you're in an industry or profession with expensive claims, causing bodily injury or increased risk of death, your premium will be higher than a profession with less expensive claims where maybe your greatest risk is just a broken laptop. So can your location. So again, your location can absolutely play a role in how much you end up paying on your policy. A retail store trying to insure their building and inventory in Florida, where Jason's from, is not going to be the same as a retail store insuring their building and inventory in Illinois. Why? Because Florida has a higher risk of being hit by hurricanes every year, especially if you're a mile or two away from the coast. But one thing that actually shocks most people is that you can get a recommendation to buy insurance coverage from, a very specific carrier referred by a friend in the industry, maybe even the exact same type of business as you, and maybe even on the exact same block as you. And you may end up paying twice as much as them, or that carrier may refuse to cover you at all. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, we literally have the exact same business, but it can be based on a number of different factors, even within the same block. So, like, for instance, which specific building are you in? What year was your building built? When's the last time the electrical, plumbing, roofing, and heating were updated, right? What's the square footage that you occupy in the building? Are you working right above a factory that makes explosives? Because, yeah, that's going to affect your business too, right? What safety precautions do you have in place? Do you have fire extinguisher, smoke, fire detectors, sprinkler system, even things that might be out of your control, so like distance to fire hydrant or the closest fire station? I mean, there's just a number of different factors that can influence your price. And any previous claims may also increase your premium as well. So in workers' compensation, which is a line that some of you may be familiar with, it's the one that states typically require if you have any employees. Carriers and states, they bake in what they call an experience modification factor. And that basically says your industry is expected to have, let's say, 2 losses over a 3-year period. So after 3 years, if you have no losses, you will actually receive a discount for being deemed safer than the industry average, right? They figure that you might have more safety precautions in place, or you're just taking greater steps to mitigate your risks. On the flip side, if you have 3 claims, you might be considered to be on the wild side, right? And you're going to probably pay more in insurance. It's similar to kind of your personal car insurance. If you get in a bunch of crashes and are driving 90 and a 65, your insurance will be more expensive. And your insurer has certain appetites that can affect your policy price too. We use the words appetite a lot in insurance. It basically means that some insurers are just more comfortable insuring certain businesses and specific industries than others. But if you're comparing insurance policies from different insurers and you see big price differences, it might just be because some insurers may not have a lot of experience covering your type of business, which is why their prices may be higher. Maybe, I don't know, one carrier has a better book of business than other. Maybe they specialize in insuring engineers, but have little to no experience writing truckers. Carriers can also non-renew your insurance policy because maybe they just have an unprofitable book of business writing truckers and they just need to cut their losses and get out of that industry. So how can you save on your policy? Keep this goal in mind. So focus on saving money without cutting down coverage. So kind of as we go through these next couple tips, there's about 10 of them. Keep in mind that it's easy to get the cheapest policy, but you want a policy that actually covers what you do. So here's a couple of tips in mind to just help you balance affordability and coverage. Tip number 1, find out what your state actually requires you to have. I know I touched on this earlier, but just know what types of business insurance policies you may need in your state. If you're trying to limit your purchase to just what you have to buy, your state's insurance requirements can typically give you a pretty good blueprint to follow.
Julian, where's the best place to find that? Is that the Secretary of State for each state?
That's a great question. Mariah, if you're on, can you put the answer in that chat? Perfect. She's already on it. I was about to say. Yeah, Mariah's our absolute expert in knowing all the different sites and everything where you can actually find information to help small business owners. So she'll put that in there in a second. Perfect. Each state has their own Secretary of State website. You should also be able to check your local city or town's website for more requirements. So for those of you that don't have a chat. Thank you, Mariah. Anything else? Cool. I'll keep running through this then. Know what types of risks you need to cover. So one of the best ways to save on business insurance is to just know some of the greatest risks that are most common to your industry. If you're a restaurant, you likely have a greater risk of starting a fire or spilling hot food on someone. If you're a contractor, you likely risk causing, injury to someone or damaging someone else's property. If you're a structural engineer, you likely risk advising a client that their home is structurally sound and then it collapses, right? Here's why. When you know the risks you might face, you might be better equipped to buy the insurance coverage that actually covers you. Otherwise, you kind of run the risk of overpaying for business insurance that can cover maybe situations that may never happen to you in your industry. So you really want to get a policy that's tailored to you and your business. Ask for recommendations from people you know, right? Getting feedback from others in your industry can kind of help you narrow down which insurance providers may be more likely to provide an affordable insurance policy. Now, like I talked about earlier, it might not be the exact same price, but it can at least potentially help you save the time that you would otherwise spend trying to get quotes from carriers that may be outside of your budget. Find an insurer who knows your industry. This kind of ties into the previous slide, but if there's an insurer who specializes in covering specific types of businesses, maybe they offer a lower price than an insurer who doesn't cover your types of businesses. I should give an example. So trades like roofers, which are typically very hard to insure because if you install your roof wrong, water damage gets in the house and kind of ruins everything inside of it. Or worst case scenario, the roof actually caves in and the property causes actual injury to someone or some significant property damage. There are companies out there that specialize in insuring roofers. All they do is insure roofers all day, every day, right? You can kind of find out which insurer may specialize in your industry by just asking fellow colleagues or maybe even a professional trade organization for recommendations. But there is someone out there for everything. And then embrace comparison shopping. So one of the best ways to avoid overpaying for business insurance is to get quotes from multiple insurers. And then another shameless plug here, if you're strapped for time, you can always use a comparison site like Simply Business, right? We have one quote form to provide you quotes from the nation's top insurers. You don't have to necessarily hop website to website just to check out policy prices, or maybe you just don't have time to talk to multiple agents, right? I mean, you are running a business after all. And if you like it, you can enter your credit card and buy coverage on the spot with an immediate policy and certificate of insurance. Tip number 6, so transfer risks to your subcontractors or your freelancers. It's a good idea to make sure that the subcontractors carry their own insurance. By taking this step, you're essentially transferring some of the risk to them, and you can even take it a step further by requesting your business to be placed as an additional insured on their policy. So let's again make it real. Let's say you're a general contractor and you sub out the plumbing work, and that plumber makes a mistake, which causes your client's house to flood. You can actually go to that plumber's insurer directly and file a claim on their behalf. So you don't get caught up in the finger pointing. You don't have to hire a lawyer, get brought into lawsuits when you had nothing to do with it. Plus, working with subcontractors who carry their own insurance kind of make customers more confident about hiring you, as you're kind of demonstrating that you're taking their property and their work pretty seriously. I'll throw another example here, just because we got some time. So maybe you're a freelance photographer that just got hired for a wedding, and you hire another freelance photographer assistant to help you get that picture perfect shot of the bride-to-be from the balcony, right? Only problem is that assistant leaned back too far, tripped and fell into that $5,000 red velvet cake. If you have them listed as an additional insured, you're basically covering yourself to make sure that you're not on the hook for someone else's negligence. And then raise your deductible. So higher deductible typically means a cheaper price, right? Many business insurance policies carry a $0 deductible, which is great news if you're looking to reduce your financial obligations if you ever have to make a claim. But there's a trade-off in having a $0 deductible means the price of your policy will typically be higher than, say, a $500 deductible, meaning you'd have to pay $500 out of your pocket before your insurance policy covers the claim. It's the same as health insurance. Bottom line, you can basically save more by opting for a higher deductible, but you may want to consider avoiding this option if the deductible is so high that it could cause financial strain if you were to make a claim. Next tip, bundle, bundle, bundle. If you can get more than one type of insurance policy, like general liability and tools equipment coverage for an electrician, or maybe professional liability and workers' comp for a couple stay-at-home consultants, it's a really good idea to see if you can bundle your policies. You might be able to get, 5-10% discount, and some insurers can offer better prices if you're willing to get multiple policies in one place, kind of like your home and auto, right? And don't pay for coverage you don't need. Another benefit to just understanding what's in your coverage is that you're better equipped to know if you're paying for something that you don't need. For example, if you're a handy person working on small projects or minor repairs, you probably need general liability insurance, but you probably don't need $5 million worth of coverage because you just don't have that much risk, right? You likely need a much lower limit, like maybe $1 million per occurrence, which occurrence means how much coverage an insurer will pay for any one particular incident, kind of in order to meet those basic state requirements. If you're not sure if you're overpaying for coverage, you can always have a licensed insurance agent walk you through what's covered and maybe even ask what they recommend for your business. And then the final tip, so spread out your premium with monthly installments. If available, monthly installments, they're super easy to set up. You can typically expect to pay, 25% down payment on the total price of the policy to just get the policy started. And then they typically split the remaining 75% over the next 10 months. Your last month typically covered in the down payment. Now the number of payments, they might split up over 9 months, 6 months, etc. But typically, down payment and then the monthly installments. If you're not sure if a monthly installment's available, don't hesitate to ask. The carrier likely offers an option. Carriers have a number of different options available if you want to do, quarterly, monthly, biannual, or just pay in full and just get it all over with. It never hurts to ask. Man, I kind of flew through this. Please pepper me with questions throughout this too.
Yeah, so let's break there real quick, Julian, because we got a couple of questions, and I know some people might have to hop off for a call or something. So let's get to some of these that we have so far, and then we can. Looks like a good break. So Zoranly mentioned earlier that they sell They have a handmade business. It's an e-commerce online business. They do personalized travel accessories and gifts in different languages, and they were asking for a little bit more information on insurance for the handmade business. Zoranly, if you want to get more specific while we're responding, feel free in the chat. Julian, I guess one thing that this comes to mind for me is e-commerce insurance, right? I mean, I think it's obvious when we think about roofers and subcontractors having insurance because we're almost expecting them to put a hole where it doesn't belong. But what about e-commerce businesses and selling out of your home? I think we can touch on a couple different policies here. E-commerce, home-based business, single founder, single person. Can you kind of summarize that? And Zoranly, if you're listening, feel free to add a little bit more context.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. And actually, e-commerce and online retailers is one of the trades that we do specialize in. I just mentioned our Amazon partnership that is literally all online retailers, right? And so what you're really looking for is product liability insurance. That's kind of the main coverage, and that is included typically under a general liability policy, right? Obviously, the different types of coverages that you'll need will depend on your business specifically. So if you have employees, you should look into workers' compensation. If you have personal property, so like inventory or something that you're trying to cover, you should definitely look into business personal property as well. And sometimes they can be covered in different things. I know you mentioned the home-based business, which is a little bit separate. Those typically can get insured under what's called a business owner's policy, which provides insurance for yourself and your contents within kind of your office. So actually kind of flipping over to the office example, if you let's say run a business from your office and your house were to, let's say, burn down, right? Again, morbid examples, I'm sorry. But let's just say that happens. Your homeowner's insurance would actually cover everything in your house except for your office operations, your entire office. So basically everything in your office, your computers, your furniture, anything that is made for business, your homeowner's policy would exclude typically. So that's what business insurance is for. It's to cover, customers that come onto your property. You can even go to, if the UPS driver is, maybe you live in Chicago, that's kind of where I was, born and raised. Those winters there get cold. So if your UPS driver is delivering a package and they slip and fall and get injured, your homeowner's insurance will actually look to see what package was being delivered. And if it has to do with your business, then they're going to exclude coverage for it. So that's why you really need a business insurance policy. Actually, flipping back to e-commerce, your main exposure is product liability, which is included in general liability coverage. But that's to cover, if you sell a product, you sell a handmade product, maybe it's a toy, and the toy, ends up becoming toxic or something to that nature. You find yourself in a bunch of lawsuits that have to do with parents that are saying that their child swallowed this and they had to go to the hospital and they had to get surgery and they're looking for you to pay for that surgery. That is kind of what products liability would cover. And again, that is typically found under a general liability policy.
That was great. Appreciate it. I want to point out Michelle's response here that state requirements aren't really easy to read, when you look at a Secretary of State, but she followed up and said, you can always look at local state organizations, right? They a lot of times your local, what would they be, like a SCORE chapter or some, maybe probably not chambers of commerce, but the organizations for each state typically provide some free help to kind of get you in the right direction. I'm sure either Simply Business or the actual insurance company will kind of steer you in the direction of what may be required. Okay, so we got a couple. Let's tackle a couple more of these while we've got a break. I saw one here for a pediatric business insurance for a pediatric clinic from Alyssa. Alyssa, if you want to again follow up in chat, but what can you tell us, Julian, about pediatric clinic? So it looks like more of a professional-based business dealing in recommendations. What do you got for us?
So funny enough, my wife is a pediatrician. She's a pediatric gastroenterologist fellow over at Vanderbilt, which is why we're located in Nashville. But your main exposure for a pediatric clinic, again, very much depends on your business. Don't take this as the gospel, but of course, some of the biggest risks that come to mind, medical malpractice would probably be your number one. That will by far be your most expensive policy because, of course, you have a great chance of being sued because of medical, malpractice. You are make a mistake and that customer's child ends up in the hospital for a prolonged period, or something worse happens to them. Medical malpractice will be your number one exposure. Also, if you have people walking on your premises, you'll certainly want general liability. That covers if any of the customers maybe slip and fall, you just had your floors freshly mopped and they slip, fall, hit their head, something to that nature. General liability insurance is definitely one that is going to be a must for you. And then the rest are very much dependent on your business, right? There's one that has a pretty horrible name to it, abuse and molestation coverage. But if you're working with kids or you're working with children, you'll definitely want it, right? Yeah, I would say those are probably the biggest. Workers' comp, obviously, if you have any employees, and then there's a bunch of other coverages depending on your specific business.
Julian, it's really helpful. I'm learning about stuff here. I'm not even in these industries, but I'm finding it fascinating. So let's work through a couple of these while we've got a break, and we want to keep them custom here. So Daryl mentions a small business doing enrichment workshops for youth. They'll have volunteers. They'll need to have 2 other paid instructors. How much workman's comp?
So workers' comp. So workers' comp is very state dependent. So typically you buy, the limits are well, workers' compensation, there's almost 2 parts to it. There's what's called employer's liability, which that limit can either be 500,000 or $1 million. And then there's something else, which is kind of called the workers' comp. So the workers' comp is actually statutory. It basically automatically covers you if your employee gets hurt on the job, right? So let's just say they hit their head and they're out of work for 3 months. They have a couple hospital bills. Workers' comp will automatically kick in. They'll pay, depending on the state, roughly 2/3 of their wage. So it's not like you're going to make, a full salary off of it. But workers' compensation will typically kind of kick in automatically to cover that employee. It's not something where you have to, take them to court and argue that, hey, I slipped on the premises. Like none of that happens. It's just like automatically employees covered under workers' comp. I think what you're also going to look for is I'd probably recommend professional liability to just look into that as well. That covers if you are making any type of recommendations to customers, and the recommendations end up causing some financial damage or something to that nature. It's a really, really like oversimplified way to think about kind of general liability and professional liability. Again, this is grossly oversimplified, but like professional liability is kind of for your white collar ones. General liability is kind of for your blue collar. So general liability is covers your any type of property damage or third-party bodily injury. And then professional liability is much more for your financial damages. You're making recommendations that don't pan out, and they come back and said, hey, you gave me really bad advice, right?
That's perfect. And Mariah pointed out, look, that it's difficult for you to give, exact policy advice on a company's site. I think we all recognize we're not looking for that, right? I think some of these examples are helpful to be able to kind of talk about something in outside of a presentation in a real life example. So I appreciate it. For example, I didn't realize about the child molestation insurance. I think that's, and it looks like that would be something Daryl should look into as well, working with youth. That's an interesting, it came up during these conversations. Let's do one more before we turn it back over to you, because I agree. If you have something very specific, it's going to be best to talk to Simply Business or to the insurance. But this one looks kind of fun, so I'm wondering what direction we can take this one. Leon mentions, what insurance do I need for putting a prototype of an ergonomic standing chair for a test at a company's office or their employee's home? So I think this is interesting because, he has a product. It's untested. There could be problems with it. And he's going to be putting this into another. So he has a business untested, putting this into another business or even an employee's home. Where does that fall? Is it just general liability, or is there something unique here?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I think that would also fall into that general liability realm. So if that chair ends up being, faulty and they sit on it, it breaks, and or I don't know, maybe the material that it's made out of ends up causing a rash or something to that nature, you'll definitely want that general liability. Again, the what you want to make sure is included is product liability, but again, that's typically found under general liability insurance policy, especially for small businesses. When you get to like the middle to large market ones, you can buy product liability kind of by itself, but for our intents and purposes, anything with a product, you're going to want at least general liability.
All right, that was fun. All right, Leanne, Julian and I want to test your chair. We'll sign a waiver to put this and try it out. Let's real quick right before we jump back to your presentation. Real quick question about your partnership with Amazon was mentioned here. Are you the insurance for Amazon? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Amazon vendors, as of I believe the cutoff date at the moment is about November 30th, but Amazon has, a bunch of sellers that are actually, Amazon, they're represented by Amazon, but they also have a bunch of third-party sellers that are just kind of all over the world, right? And all over the US. And if Amazon is basically requiring them as part of this new mandate to purchase insurance within the next, 30 to 60 days here. And in order for those vendors to purchase insurance, they need to have insurance options, right? So as they go through their Amazon portal, we are actually the preferred option. We're kind of the first choice that comes up. And so if you're an Amazon vendor, you actually see Simply Business in your portal, and you can click on Simply Business, come directly through the quote form. It's a bit of a customized journey, so it will, look and feel kind of like an Amazon customer would typically feel, and they would be able to go in there, fill out information, get multiple quotes from different providers. They can kind of compare and contrast them, speak to someone if they want to. If not, completely your choice. Enter in credit card information and actually buy coverage on the spot.
Hey, Julian, little feedback. Maybe you can I turned my volume down. If you can turn your volume up maybe a little bit, or maybe scoot a little closer to the mic. Julian had a little technical difficulty, and we had to switch over to just the computer mic to make sure we could stay on schedule. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump back into the presentation.
Cool. So I really just had kind of this last one left. So kind of, in summary, just don't get caught by these mistakes. So hiding risks to get a lower premium. The small amount of money you might save and downplaying your risks could end up costing you big time if you ever have to make a claim. So for example, your insurer could end up denying your claim and canceling your policy altogether if they found you didn't disclose accurate information when actually purchasing your policy. Second one, choosing price over coverage. So while you don't want to overpay for business insurance, you clearly don't want to underpay either. That could put you in a tough spot where your policy isn't covering you for the situations you need. If you're interested in the cheapest insurance policy option, then make sure you know why the policy is priced the way that it is. If all things remain equal and you're not sacrificing on coverage, then great, go for it, right? But if the policy limit is lower than the others, that may mean you need to pay more out of pocket if a claim happens that surpasses that limit. Insurance it's a funny business. It's always the one thing that you don't want until you need it. And when you need it, you really, really need it. I mean, how many times have you been asked whether you want insurance for, I don't know, your iPhone, maybe said no thanks, and then dropped it as soon as you walk out the door of the Apple store? Maybe that's just me. But the only difference is there's no manufacturer's warranty, and you can get sued for everything that you're worth. And depending on how you file your business, yes, they may be able to come after your personal assets too. And then the last one, just not asking enough questions. It's worth taking the time to understand what's in your policy, especially if it's something you're not 100% sure about. That's why, if you're either buying online or through an insurance agent, it's a good idea to ask questions about what your coverage includes. These questions aren't just, great for clearing up any confusion. They can also help you get the answers that you need to just feel more confident about what you're actually buying. We love to use the line, if you're if you're a dog walker and you're buying insurance as a dog walker, make sure that carrier is not excluding coverage for dog bites on your policy. Or else it's like, what are you buying insurance for at that point? We here at Simply Business understand that you may have questions about your policy, and we're completely here to support you. I mean, we take a lot of the legwork out of shopping for you so you can truly see apples to apples quote comparisons without worrying about any hidden exclusions. And we also have agents to support you throughout the process. So if you ever feel the need to just pick up the phone and talk to someone, we're here for you. Cool. So that was it. So hopefully, that was helpful. You found at least one thing that I said today to be useful. If not, I realize I probably gave a bunch of morbid examples that you can probably share with family and friends at the dinner table and be like, that was a super depressing topic. But hopefully it's just a topic and you'll never have to actually live through any of these examples.
Thanks, Julian. Yeah, I definitely share things I learned throughout the day because I spend most of my day reading, and then I sit down at the dinner table. I'm like, you gotta hear what I just learned. And so, yeah, during these conversations, I'm always finding something. So, really appreciate it. It was informative. I do like that. I've got a question while we're waiting on any others to come in. We do have maybe 10 minutes or so reserved left. If you want to ask some specific questions of Julian while we have his attention. But one while we're waiting is, can you talk about the difference between errors and omission and professional liability? I mean, we've talked about general liability, but the three of these, general, errors and omissions, and professional, are all designed to cover us if we make a mistake or our customers think we make a mistake or our clients. Yeah. But so I think we understand general liability in its general nature, but what about professional versus errors and omissions?
It's a great question. It comes up time and time again. The truthful answer is it's basically the same thing. It's just tailored for different businesses. So when you think about errors and omissions, you think about like an accountant who might make an error or an omission, maybe a bookkeeper, a tax preparer. And so the coverage form itself is just going to be slightly more tailored towards an accountant than, say, a professional liability policy where you're truly giving advice, right? But both of them cover if you make a financial mistake and it causes financial damage, right? A lot of times you'll hear people literally use those terms interchangeably, but it's, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. There's some minor nuances in the actual policy itself, but it basically covers. You can't buy really both of them, I'll say that. It's either one or the other.
Interesting. So working off that last, you can't buy both of them. It's one or the other. I guess you work with your insurance agent to figure out what's going to be the most comprehensive.
Right. It will typically depend on your business. So if it's a good insurance agent, if you're an accountant, they're not going to say you need professional liability because you're going to need errors and omissions coverage, right? Typically carriers will kind of do that legwork ahead of time. So they'll say, hey, here's your errors and omissions policy for a notary, right? Or something kind of to that nature. So you typically won't have, like, if you're I'll go back to the accountant example, you typically won't have professional liability offered for you. And then if you're an engineer, same type of thing.
Got it. Okay. Lou mentioned something about liability waivers. Would they be required for a fitness business? Can you talk a little bit about, not just the fitness side of the business, but liability waivers in general? Would the insurance company require you? Would they tell you that you have to have it for this policy? Is it just a good idea? How do you find, or create one specifically for your business? Do they actually reduce risk? Maybe talk about some of those aspects of waivers.
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's a couple different types too. So I would say a waiver of subrogation, and that basically it prohibits an insurance carrier from recovering money that's paid on a claim from a negligent third party. So for instance, if you're I'm trying to think of a good example here, if you're getting sued. Waiver of subrogation. So it's like if you have well, I'll think on that. I'll think of like a good example for you, but basically it really depends on your clients and kind of what your clients require. Sorry. Um, it's definitely a good idea to kind of look into different ones. Another one that you can kind of look into is the additional insured as well. Oh, perfect, Mariah, you're saving me here.
No, she's answering another question, Julian. You're not off the hook.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about it. So I mean, I think you mentioned earlier about trying to reduce your liability by passing that on to your subcontractors or freelancers. What about passing? From my understanding, a waiver, especially in the fitness business where you're working with a client, you're passing that some of that responsibility to the client, to the person who's coming in, the customer, right? I mean, I'd imagine a liability isn't going to save you if you're grossly negligent, but you're trying to have them recognize that this is maybe a dangerous sport or a dangerous environment and to reduce your risk. I guess, is it helpful for all businesses to have some form of liability or some sort of a waiver?
Yeah, I would say, well, again, you're not going to love my answer, but it really depends on the type of business. It's definitely something to look into. I don't think necessarily that all businesses need a waiver of subrogation, but it's definitely going to depend on kind of your specific business, what type of clients you're working with. It does add kind of another kind of layer to protection. It would be if if a carrier kind of pays out a policy and maybe there's a negligent third party. So again, going back to that subcontractor example, your subcontractor, I guess here, I'll give a good example. General contractor, you have different subcontractors that work for you. If you're a general contractor, then yes, you want to make sure that the subcontractor has a waiver of subrogation, right? Or that you require your subs to have a waiver of subrogation. And that would be if your subcontractor makes a mistake, basically the carrier let me think more on that one.
So it's really, I mean, we don't have to get too specific because it really is a question about, talking with your insurance provider to see what they recommend. It's also a business decision, right? Based on how much risk you think the client is actually experiencing. It's going to turn customers away if you run a nail salon and you start having them sign waivers before they sit down, right? So it really depends on the business. And I think that's probably best with a conversation with the Simply Business customer support folks, as well as the as well as your insurance. As we're waiting for maybe some of the last questions here, we'll give it another minute or two. If you have specific questions about an industry, Mariah's posted certain links. Simply Business does a great job for each industry about breaking down, what is kind of generally required for that industry, and what some additional reading to think about. So if you have a specific, what should I do for subcontractors or nail salons, go to Simply Business, take a look at some of the guides that they have. If you have some kind of general questions that you want to ask, feel free in the last minute or two here, because I think the questions are wrapping up. But one question I have as we're waiting for that would be, is there a problem for shopping around? So let's assume most businesses that are on right now have some form of coverage. They've been operating for a while. Is there any type of problem, to getting another quote? Am I going to get a credit card, a credit score ding? What's the challenge?
It's a great question. So there's no problem at all with it. I actually encourage you to kind of shop around and always make sure that even if you've been with one company for 20 years, still just kind of see what's out there, right? Companies go, up on their rates and down on their rates all the time, kind of based on the movement in the market, maybe how many claims have happened in the past year, and every single carrier is different. So I would absolutely say shop around. One thing that carriers may not let you do is if you're maybe midterm on a policy, so you have 6 months remaining on the annual policy, they may not let you actually get a quote from them then and there. You might have to be more like 3 months out, right? Or 2 months out, or maybe even 60 days out, right? Before you can actually start shopping for insurance, because they just don't want customers maybe bouncing from one to the other midterm. But no, I mean, if you want to look at renewal for just a different carrier, absolutely, highly encourage shopping around to just see what else is out there. And to answer that other question, there is no ding to your credit score or anything like that. I highly recommend it.
Okay. Great. Well, this has been really informative. So, I mean, I think the next steps. Let's see. We got another question just popped in here. How would I pick the best kind of insurance? What is the best way of choice? So, this is really what we've been talking about for the last hour here. Really, I mean, it's very specific to your industry. So, again, I think it's kind of the takeaway here. Unless you have a specific place, you kind of think you should send somebody. Go to simplybusiness.com. And they have a lot of guides specific for your industry. They've taken the effort to figure out what you need for each of these. They have the additional resources, and they're just a quick conversation away with their awesome customer support folks to be able to get a little bit more specific questions based on your industry. So I think that's really helpful. Great next step. Did you have another place people should check out?
No, I mean, just simplybusiness.com. And I promise I will follow up on that waiver of subrogation example and just give a little bit more information about just the types of waivers and everything that kind of goes into that. Because now it's just bugging me.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up. We've given some time for some other questions that come here. Julian, we really appreciate your time.